Good afternoon, everyone, or morning, depending on where you are. Welcome, welcome, welcome. I'd like to do some of the housekeeping first, and that is that we will be recording this session so that others will be able to see it after the fact. And we're letting in a few people. But while we are getting everything stabilized, I'd like for you to tell us where you are visiting us from today. If you'll put in the chat where you're from, okay, Colorado is in the house, in the room, and we'd love to hear where you all are from this morning. And as you guys are doing that and introducing yourselves and letting us know where you're reaching out to us from this morning, I'll go ahead and introduce myself, introduce you for those that this may be your first opportunity to join us with Atlantic Institute, and then our guest for today. I'll start with myself. I am Lorana Hughes. I am one of the field trip instigators for Atlantic Institute. Normally, I am in Cuenca, Ecuador, but today I am in Atlanta, Georgia. I had the opportunity to come back to the States to see my youngest child graduate from med school last weekend and spend some time with my grandson this week. And I will be leaving tomorrow and headed to Panama and then back home to Ecuador, which is where home is for me now. I got involved with Atlantic Institute, Colorado, Aiken, MA. I think that's Massachusetts. I see a couple from Massachusetts, Salem, Greenville. Yay, yay. Welcome everyone in. I got involved with Atlantic Institute several years ago when I was in the community. I was living in South Carolina. I was a farmer running a farm to table restaurant and a small farm and working on how we fix community, and got involved with the Atlantic Institute back then. And as life has changed and retirement has come and I've changed continents, they said, we'd love for you to stay involved. I became one of the board members back then and served in that capacity for several years. And now I'm kind of like a retired correspondent that brings really cool field trips to Atlantic Institute once a month. And as I was preparing for today, you do things like pull up and remind us what our mission is. And I thought this, more than so many of the field trips that I've gone on that are definitely wonderful, but this really speaks to the mission of Atlantic Institute. The mission, as it's stated, says that at the Atlantic Institute, we believe in fostering a global community through education, interfaith dialogue, and meaningful social experiences. Our diverse range of programs is designed to inspire, connect, and promote understanding among individuals from all walks of life. And as I thought about that in preparing the technical parts of bringing this experience to you, I thought, what better than genealogy to do that? To be able to show how connected we really are, even though oftentimes we think we're so disconnected. And sometimes our lives lead us to believe that in ways that sometimes aren't true. But today we have with us for the second time, Donnie Austin, who's going to be sharing with you some of the points of connection that we have found in life, and that is genealogy. One of the things about genealogy that keeps with this is that, one, it fosters a global community, and he'll probably share of some of those global connectednesses that he's found. It also provides meaningful social experiences, and I hope that today will inspire you, will show you how to be more connected. And I hope that those points of connection help us to promote understanding of individuals from various walks of life in some way in your life specifically. And so I'd like to introduce a friend, Donnie Austin, who is another retired immigrant who has decided to take up life in Ecuador, South America. And he's going to be sharing with us today Before I turn it over to him, some housekeeping. We are recording this. As you came in, it probably gave you the prompt. We want to say that to let you know that this is recorded, and we promote this or put this information up and archive it on the Atlantic Institute YouTube so that you can go back, and any of the pointers that he gives that you miss, you'll be able to go back and revisit those. With that, let's see, did anyone else come in? Thank you for putting part 1 on YouTube. We forgot to record the very beginning of it, so, catch up, do the best you can. And I'm going to also put today's slides in the chat. And if anyone has an additional interest in those, let me know. We have, if you signed up through Eventbrite, we'll be able to send you that also by email. And I'll commit myself to making sure that we send that to the email list for those that show up or registered for today. Thank you, Donnie, for making that available. I think New York has come in. Thank you for being here. Thank you for giving us your time. We'll try to honor and respect that time. And so without doing too much more talking, welcome, Donnie. Anything that I didn't do in introductions that you would like to share with them, please do so. And we will turn this time over to you.
All right. Thank you, Lorana, and good morning. Thank you, Atlanta Institute, for making this time and this space available. As Lorana said, hey, I'm a retiree who was chosen Ecuador as my soft landing. And let's dive in. This is part 2 of genealogical discoveries, how to trace your roots. And I'm going to do just a brief review from where we were last time. Basically, this is like a beginner's dive in, a first level introduction to how to trace your roots. And we'll talk a little bit about what Lorana touched on, as how small the world is, and we really have more connectivity than we might believe that we have. So again, this is part 2. Some of this has been covered before. If you've already dived into genealogy research, and some of this information is going to be old hat to you, but feel free to ask any questions along the way. What we're going to touch on today, we're going to pick up on building what we call floating trees. I'll explain that later. We'll talk a little bit more about the free resources that are available online to you, and DNA testing, genetic genealogy. So on the first slide, you see big question is, what is genealogy? It's the study of families and family histories. And that includes your direct ancestors, your relatives, your cousins, first, second, third, whatever, your in-laws, don't forget your in-laws, and your outlaws. Like it or not, that's your family tree. If you were to actually start writing and building your family tree, those are the components that will be the primary focus of your tree. Your direct relatives and ancestors, relatives, cousins, in-laws, and outlaws. So some folks you're surprised to see in your tree, and some that you'll be pleasantly surprised you have in your tree. But all of this is really just steps to how to trace your roots. And we start off with one of the first things you can do is, if you already have a family historian in your family bingo, you hit gold. If not, then you become the family historian. You take the first step in. And that's about collecting and organizing the information you have, talking to relatives. And those are the first steps that you would take before you even start building your tree. Talk to as many relatives as you can in your family, because as much information as you can. And we're going to go through each of these steps in greater detail. And then you would build a tree, your basic tree, access the resources that are free. You don't have to pay for a lot of the resources that are available. They are free online. There's some that you do have to pay for. And of course, one of those is genetic testing. But that's another level. But if you do choose to dive into genetic testing, DNA testing, that's going to be a whole nother level, another doorway into your research that will open up so many avenues. You'll just be amazed. And then, of course, consolidate all this information into a journal so you can pass it on to the next generation. And most important of all, just enjoy the journey along the way. You may not find all the solutions and all the branches and all the answers to who is my third cousin twice removed. You may not discover all these answers, but in the process, just enjoy the journey. So what's the next step? First of all, I always like to emphasize this. This is sort of help you sort of base yourself as you're doing your research, because you're going to find some things in your genealogical research or ancestral research that may be surprising. But it really shouldn't be surprising, because if you look back far enough, you'll discover we all share a common beginning. Of course, we're all here on the planet Earth. So we all have different levels of overlapping ancestry. And so in the process of doing your research, you have to really sort of think about that. So when you're doing your ancestry research and you find, oh, I have a cousin in the UK, or I have a cousin in Cameroon, or I have a cousin in Latin America. Well, how's that possible? Well, you'll understand that better if you always sort of keep this in mind, because someone had to leave somewhere to arrive where we are today. For example, I'm in Ecuador. I've actually found relatives here in Ecuador. So at some point, one of my distant relatives had to leave wherever my origins are. So somewhere in Western Africa. So they had to immigrate. They had to leave either by force or voluntarily, or depending on what time frame we're looking at. And then, of course, when you're arriving somewhere, you're choosing to arrive at this new location, such as LaRon and myself. We were in Ecuador. So it starts with someone leaving a certain point in time at a certain place, and then choosing to be in a new place and arriving. So now there's ancestry that I've discovered here that I can trace back, or you can trace back when you're doing your own research. So just keep in mind, it's a big world, but it's really a small world when you start looking at your tree, because when you look at your family tree, it's not a nice, neat family tree, mom, dad, grandparents, great grandparents. It's more like a family forest, because you'll start to see these overlying layers of your maternal line may drift into your paternal line, and then vice versa. So these things start to happen, and it sort of complicates your tree, but you just have, if you go back to that first slide and sort of think about, it's a small world. So you do have broader connections. So you can flow through the next two slides, and we're going to go to, the one right after that. Yeah, because here we are, 2024, there's over 8 billion people in the world. And if you look at this map showing, I guess over the years, you'd have to say, starting from the continent of Africa, I think National Geographic had a very good documentary they had showing the origins of humanity. At some point, they believe, or we believe, based on historical information, started somewhere in Central Africa. And so over the course of thousands and thousands and thousands of years, these migration patterns happen. And so when you're looking at your ancestry, again, you may see distant cousins in a continent that you have no information. Okay, that's maybe a puzzle or a question to you, but when you look back again and think about this whole immigration pattern, there's 8 billion people. So somehow your tree is leaning maybe to Europe, or leaning more to Africa or Latin America, your ethnicity. But when you start to look at the big picture, it doesn't seem so puzzling. So that's something, again, this is just basic information to keep in mind as you're doing your research. You can go to the next slide. So again, when you're starting out, the first step is, if you have a family historian, ask around. Hey, maybe it's your aunt or great uncle, or your grandfather, someone who has already taken up the banner and started family research. Well, if there is, then bingo. Like I said, you've hit gold. Sit down, talk with them, document as much information as you can, collect photos, get information about marriages, and as much parental information, grandparent, great grandparents you can. Talk to close family members, find out if there are any notable figures in your family, and talk about ethnicity. Maybe you have Italian ancestry, or Germanic, or maybe you're from the Caribbean. When you talk to your great grandparents or grandparents, or your parents, and they give you this information. So you can also gather a lot of information by researching and searching for family reunion information. If you're a member of Facebook, a lot of times you'll see announcements on Facebook about regional and national family reunions based on either your surname or your area. Maybe it's a South Carolina or Aiken, South Carolina reunion. So some of these first steps is is probably a very good place to start. Just start at home first, is what I like to say. Start at home first. But if you don't have a family history, if you don't have the capabilities or don't feel confident, you can also reach out to a board certified genealogist. They're a professional in the field, and they can provide services and give you critical research to help jumpstart your search. You can go to the next slide. So what are some of the resources that are available? The next slide, you'll see that libraries. Library, you can usually go into library, use their computer, get yourself a library card. If you don't already have one, you can access ancestry.com, familysearch.org. Familysearch.org is a free resource that you can use to research. Start again with your own family first, as much information as you can get. You'll be able to access census records, obituaries, probate records, historical information that may be online before you dive into any paid services. And then another service I have an asterisk is WikiTree, and that's an international organization that is focused on genealogy, but in a global sense. So you can create a free account on Ancestry, you can create a free account on Family Search, and you can create a free account on WikiTree. And between these three, by starting your basic family tree with information that you know, you'll find hints, you'll get access to resources. You may see even other people who have trees that they've built who have some of your family members in it. And that's how you sort of build this network, by first using public resources that are free. And again, the public library, your local public library, is a great place to start. Then the next slide, one of the precautions I always say when you are researching, always pay attention to the information that you're putting in your tree. Make sure it's factual. You may come across trees where someone says, oh, Johnny was married to Susie and they had, 17 children. But okay, where's the fact to back that up? Is there a census record? Is there a marriage record? Is there a baptismal record? Because what will happen is if you're not careful, you'll copy someone else's tree and they are starting with incorrect information because it's hearsay or, somebody told me this. So they put it in their tree as if it's fact. And you see that, you copy the information, but there's no citation, there's no source, there's no census record, death certificate, there's no obituary, there's no information, so you can sort of confirm what you're putting in your tree is correct. So the first recommendation, when you are starting out with your tree, stick to the facts, because that will help you build a more confirmed resource in your own tree for your next generation. So what they're building on, you don't want to pass down information that is, just a hypothetical question. I think this is Johnny's wife, and I think this is John. Well, try as best as you can to stick to the facts. And so we're going to dive in. The next step on the next screen is, how do you build your tree? So we talked first about the resources that are available, the free resources, the library. If you don't have a computer of your own, you can go to the library, use their system, create an account, or if you have your computer or even on your phone. I always recommend start with Ancestry. You don't have to have a paid account. This is a free service as well. They have a level where you can just build your tree. Although you'll see different opportunities to, acquire paid services. You don't really have to do that. You can start with a free tree and a free account and maintain that free account and still build your tree as wide and as deep as you want to. So you would go to ancestry.com, open up an account, use your email, Apple, etc., Google account. And I put a note here, and I said, building your tree and build floating trees. And I'll explain that here in a minute. So first step, again, after you gather your resources, get as many facts as you can, now open an account and begin to build a tree. So now we can go to the next step. So when you've opened up an Ancestry account, so you're starting on your tree. So typically you'll just start with yourself. If you don't want to start with yourself, you can start, let's say, with the parent. And you only put in as much information as you want. And again, the level of privacy that you set up is dependent on your level of comfortability. So first step, open the account. You saw the slide, create the tree, you put the first person in, and this is how you actually do that. You'll actually be prompted for a screen. It says, are you adding yourself or are you adding someone else? So you put as much information that you feel comfortable, knowing that you can set the level of privacy in the process later down the road, or you can set it up initially. So you would enter in the information, first, last name, gender, birth, etc. Then you would name the tree. And at this point, you have an opportunity to set up the privacy of your tree as well. Because if you're building this just for your own private research, and maybe you just want this just for your family members and to help them feel more comfortable, you just make this a private tree. So when it says that prompts you, allow others to view this tree, are living people. So you can uncheck this box. And so this would another level of privacy for yourself and your family. So you've opened an account, you've created your first tree, you've named the tree, and this is the other screen that you'll be prompted on after you've named the tree and you selected your first level of privacy. You'll notice under the bottom section there asks, also prevent your tree from being found in searches. So even though the information you put in your tree is private, you can also have this extra level of privacy where your tree won't even be found in searches. So anyone on Ancestry who's searching, let's say for the same person that you're researching, your tree won't come up in that search. And so depending on how much privacy you want, or if you just want to make it a public tree, let's say you're just interested in getting as much information as you want, it's not that critical, and you want to have this information shared publicly, then you can, of course, select public tree. So once you've built a tree and you put the first person in the next slide, you'll see, so I just named this person sample person. So now you can add maternal or paternal relatives at the same time, and you can go as far back as you can based on information that you have. So in essence, right now, when I said the term floating tree, in essence, this is a floating tree right now. It's not connected to anyone. It's just this sample person. I haven't put anyone else in. So when you're doing your research, say, for example, this is your sample person, and you want to put in your third cousin. You know your third cousin, but you don't know anything about their information. Well, you don't know how you're connected, but you just know you're a third cousin. But they don't have enough information to confirm how you're connected either. So you would put that person, your third cousin, in this tree. It doesn't really matter what position you put them in. You could show as if they were a mother or a father. And I know it sounds sort of kooky, but this is just a step to add a floating tree. So for example, you could add them as if they were a father, for example. It doesn't matter the gender or anything, because you're only using this as a tool to create a floating tree. So once you've added them in that position, now you'll be able to see their information, and it allows you to edit their relationship to you. And then you would just delete the relationship that you just put in. If you put them in as a father, you just delete them. So now they're floating in your tree. So now you can go to the next slide. And the following slide. And so as you're building a tree, you see you can start building out your paternal and maternal side. You're putting in as much information as you have available. Then as you're putting information in, you can go to the next slide. You can actually do searching as well. When you look at the profile of, for example, the person that says father a dot person. So you see the block that prompts you for searching. So you could actually click that box, and that would be what would be represented in the next slide. So now you're in a search screen. So now you're on Ancestry, you built your tree, but you don't have enough information. So on the next slide, you'll see that's the screen that shows your search results. So when you're searching for someone, you'll have a list of possibilities. And if you're not sure if this is the same person based on date of birth, place of birth, you can just make note of that person in your journal, and then you can come back to that at a later date. Or you can add that person to your tree and just put a question mark as if unconfirmed. And then on the left-hand side, you'll see all the different filters that you can search for based on census records, their military service, family trees, which is a very good resource. You can look for, let's say you're searching for your grandparent, and you can look under family trees as a filter to see if anyone else has your grandparent in their tree. Then you go to the next slide. So all this is combining all the information you have and consolidating it into your tree. And so now Ancestry will start generating hints. And these hints will be records, census records, or photos, or stories, or other members' trees. And you'll be able to compare that information to the information you put in your tree. Maybe you found they had a census record for your grandmother. So now you can extract that information and put that in your tree, or you found a photo or someone else's census record, or there's another a record of marriage or birth that relate to someone in your tree. So these hints will start being displayed the more you research each person in your tree. So as you go up your maternal line and the paternal line. And then I have highlighted the DNA because once you get to a certain point, let's say you've exhausted as much information as you know. So now the next step is DNA. So that's the next slide. So
Let
now
me
with
pause you right there. Before we go too far away, there was a question that feels relevant for that first section, and that was, how many generations can you go back with Ancestry? Is there a limit?
Ancestry, now you have to think about it. There really is no limit because it's based on you, because you're putting the information in. They have records. I have a cousin who's traced his family back to the 1600s. That's pretty far back. And there's another slide that will sort of dive into what the significance of that is. If you can go back as far as the 1600s, that is a huge amount of ancestral information. So to answer your question, there's no limit as far as what you can put in. There's a limit as far as what records, valid records that they have. For example, 1600s to 1500s, how valid is that record to you currently today? That might be someone else who put information in that may be related to a person that you think is your relative, but unless you have a data chain of facts from you directly to 1600, it's possible, but it's the odds of that for majority of the population is very low. So the answer, yes, you can trace back as far as records are available in Ancestry, but you yourself, you can put in as much information as you want. If you know back to the 1400s, you can you can enter it in your tree, but it should be facts. Like I said in the earlier slide, only enter what you know that's factual.
So it would be limited based on the information that's actually available that can be factually confirmed in some way.
Yes, but again,
But they won't limit you from putting as many
no,
generations of information as you have.
no.
Okay.
But
And
again, just the precaution is make sure it's factual.
And then the second question, really, you're getting ready to go into DNA. So let me just throw that out there because you may incorporate that into the information you give us. Subi said, linguistic and cultural evidence shows that my ancestry spans across Central Asia to South Asia to the Far East. Can DNA tests provide me with specific clues as to different gene groups in those areas that I carry, or are those tests more Eurocentric? So just throwing that out there as we go into DNA, unpause, and DNA. Okay.
And that's a good question. I'm actually going to cover on that because I have a portion of my ancestry, my ethnicity, whatever you'd like to call it, which is also Southeast Asian. And there's a way to focus on a certain portion of your ancestry using genetic DNA, including Asian, European, Caribbean, African, and I'll explain it a little bit later. There's some charts I'll show you, but there are more tools that you can use. It depends on if that particular person or branch of your ancestor you know is your maternal, then you would take a certain type of test called a mitochondria DNA. If you know it's on your maternal side, if you know if you're tracing on a paternal side, if you have a brother or a male in your family that can trace using the Y DNA testing, then you can follow that branch of ethnicity as well. But the general DNA testing, which is an autosomal DNA, it's your mother and father's line, so it's not really ethnic specific. It is your maternal and paternal line culminated together. You'd have to take a more specific DNA test if you know which branch, maternal, paternal, of that specific ethnicity you're looking for. And we'll cover that a little bit later as well. Did I answer that portion of the question? I hope, because I don't want to dive too deep right now because we still have just a little bit of time left. I want to make sure I can cover the other slides. Okay, as we said, traditional DNA testing is autosomal. So before you've dived into DNA testing, you've exhausted ideas, you've exhausted traditional ancestral research. So which is just building a tree based on census records, just facts, data facts. So now you're going to go into DNA testing, which opens up a whole nother avenue of results, because it's really, like I like to say, it's a recipe book with millions of recipes inside. So we're carrying this DNA inside. So we actually have our ancestral history in our DNA on our maternal and our paternal side. And it's a code. Basically, it's a maternal code. So with genetic DNA testing now, this technology is advanced to the point right now you can take a genetic DNA test and determine your maternal matches and your paternal matches, and you'll be able to follow those and enter those into your tree in a way that now this is factual. You may not know who they are personally, relationship wise, but you can factually say, well, this person is on my maternal or this person is on my paternal side. And then the other thing I like to say is important is that you take your traditional ancestral tree, lay that over your, just think of it this way, laying that over your genetic tree, and you're going to see some overlaps. And there are going to be, again, some puzzles, going to be some mysteries. And the one thing that I want you just to make sure you go away with is that the presence of DNA means everything, but the absence of DNA means nothing. In the next couple of slides, I'll talk to you about that, because that's important to remember. The presence of DNA is everything, but the absence of it is nothing. So if you are going to take a dive into genetic genealogy, these are the major platforms that you want to consider: Ancestry.com, MyHeritage, Family Tree DNA, 23andMe, African Ancestry, and GEDmatch is more of a database of DNA results. So, for example, if you're just interested in more of a health and genetic DNA leaning type of result, you'd pick 23andMe. But just the most robust generic DNA testing site is Ancestry, because they have the biggest database. And again, you may have a preference, but these are the major platforms you'd use. And what you'd also want to consider after you've taken your DNA test, whichever you choose, whichever platform you choose, you'd want to use and open up an account at gedmatch.com. I put an asterisk there. And again, you'll have this slide presentation. So just remember and make a note to yourself, GEDmatch. You want to upload your DNA or download it from whichever platform you tested, for example, Ancestry, then upload it to GEDmatch, because that's a database of results. For example, you tested on Ancestry, but the person you're trying to match or who could solve this whole mystery puzzle, they tested on 23andMe. So if you're not on the same platform, you'd never find each other. But if you both uploaded to GEDmatch, now you see that connection. That's another reason why you recommend the GEDmatch. So the next slide, remember when I said the presence of DNA means everything, but the absence of it means nothing. We don't really have enough time because this is a general level dive in. I want to make sure we leave time for questions, but just refer back to the slide and keep in mind when you're getting your results, when you're looking at your results, maybe seeing some mysteries or people who don't show up, who should show up. Real quickly, what I'm just going to show is that your DNA, this is the X chromosome. So this is the 23rd chromosome, what they call the sex chromosome. And this determines your physically, biologically determines your gender. A father can pass an X or a Y to their offspring. A, a mother or female can only pass an X. And this X is sort of recombined, as you notice on the top, the mom on the left, the X that she passes to her daughter is sort of a combination, a recombination of the X that she received from her mother and her dad. So you'll see that if you stay on the left side, she passes it down to her granddaughter and her grandson. They both have sort of a recombination of the yellow and the purple on the X. And if you look at the right-hand side, a father, a male can only pass a Y DNA and an X. And a Y is what determines physically, biologically, a male. So when he passes his Y, that Y is pretty much unchanged. And that goes back to what we were saying earlier. If you're, let's say you're trying to follow your Asian or African ancestry, and let's say it's on your dad's side. So let's say it's dad at the top and it's in his Y DNA. Well, he passes it to his son, but his daughter doesn't have that. So when she tests, it's like, wow, I don't have that ethnicity of my father. And it's because the way that DNA is passed, it's random. It is not an exact duplication. So you don't have an exact duplicate of all the ethnicity of your parents. If you have a Native American ancestry, that may be a great grandmother, you or your children may not have any of it, but perhaps your sibling may. So that just goes back to the whole idea. When you look at your results, just remember the presence of DNA means everything. If you see it there, sure, it's there. But if you don't see it, it doesn't mean anything because it's a random way that our DNA is passed down from generation to generation. Okay, next slide. And again, this sort of puts the exclamation point on it. For example, I have 18,000 plus matches, and that was way back in a couple of months ago. I probably have more today. So it can be data overload. And again, the question that was earlier about tracing your ethnicity through genetic DNA, those are the tests that I was mentioning again. You'll follow your what's called your haplogroup or your ancestral groupings, ancestral, historical. You can take a Y DNA and you'll find out your ancestral groupings by your maternal line. That's the Y DNA test. And then the mitochondria DNA, that's what you use to trace your maternal line. And the autosomal is a combination of both. So when you do get your DNA results, you may have more than this. You may have 25,000 DNA matches. So it's data overload. It could be, but color coding your matches is something that you just keep in mind is something to do. And I just want you to make a note of that. So you refer back to the slide. If you do go forward with genetic DNA testing, you'll want to color code your matches by maternal side and paternal. I mean, some folks just do it the old fashioned, a pink for the female side and a blue for the male side. So when you're looking at your matches and you're following them down, you can sort of get a better idea of who's matching who. So when you look at your shared matches, you can say, oh, this person matches my dad's side, this person matches my mom's side. And that information will help you better focus in on your tree. Okay, the next slide, again, just bring it back down reality so you sort of realize, I know we were talking earlier, that question about, how far back can you trace? Let's just say, for example, you're looking at fourth or fifth cousin. That's not too far out. You're matching with that person with a third great grandparent or a fourth great grandparent. That doesn't sound too bad. Or you have to look at the numbers. Starting at the top, you have yourself, you have your parents. So you have two parents. When you get to your grandparents, sure, you have four grandparents, but now you have six total direct descendants. You're descended from six people. So that's pretty easy to find. So first cousins, yeah. Now you jump up to second cousin. Okay, you've got eight great grandparents, but now you have a total of 14 direct descendants that you descend from. And so as you go down each line, so when you actually get to that fourth or fifth or even sixth, you've got 256 direct persons that you descend from, but a total of 510. So even that's like almost trying to find a needle in a haystack. And remember, those are just your direct descendants, folks that you descend directly from. That's not counting the aunts, the uncles, the it multiplies in such a way that it can be daunting. So just keep this in mind too. And there's a chart that I'll show you on the next slide that sort of help you get sort of your bearings. But just keep that in mind, because when you're looking for a fourth, fifth, or sixth, you're really searching for one person within 200 up to 254 plus persons. And so use this chart sort of just to help you zero in on how you can find your matches. Like if you're doing genetic DNA testing and you're getting your results and it says, hey, this person is my fourth cousin. So you know that you're related to them by your third great grandparent. Then when you get into fourth cousin, first removed, and so on. This is just a convenient chart to sort of help you get an idea of where you are and how many possibilities, and that's what's at the top. At the top of each column, you'll see, for example, in the third great grandparent, you'll see there's 32 great grandparents that you have, in addition to all the other aunts and uncles, etc. So that's just a point of reference for you to sort of help you zero in on who and how you're related to someone. The next chart, again, when you're starting your ancestral journey, just try to focus on the topics of interest. I know the earlier question is about ethnicity. So what I did was, and I recommend people do, create a tree, a general tree with all of your ancestry, your paternal and maternal side, but also create specific trees focused on your areas of interest and your regions of interest. If it's Europe, Asia, Latin America, Caribbean, whatever, create a tree and then enter all of your matches that have that commonality. That will help you sort of focus your research and dive in, because otherwise, it's very easy to start going down rabbit trails. These are two resources that you can use if you have Native American ancestry you're trying to research. It's called the DAWS roll. And this is one of the resources that's on Ancestry. On the next slide, you'll see also have Freedmen's Records. That's for tracing your African-American ancestors who may have had census records that tie to them prior to Emancipation Proclamation and shortly afterwards. So there's a deeper dive in both of those records and what you can find, but a lot of times to get access to those, there's some resources you can access online where it's free. I think FamilySearch.org may have some Freedmen's Records and DAWS records rolls. So those are two resources you can use for Native American and African American ancestral research prior to Emancipation Proclamation. And of course, the back screen, you'll see Ancestry allows you to search specifically databases that they have for census records, ancestral records, historical records around the world. So you can check those specific regions as well. This next slide shows sort of a general idea of my own personal research focus in my ethnicity, where I'm tracing my indigenous North American ancestry. So I have a tree just for that. My Latin American, my Asian, my European. And so I would recommend that everyone does the same thing when you're diving in, is to also use that as a focus. Is find out where you want to focus, and the time period, the region of the world, build a specific tree focused on that region, and then try to put as many matches and historical information as you have available in those areas. And the next screen, then I'm going to open up to more questions. Again, in review, collect as much information as you can from your direct family members. And if you don't have anyone who's a family historian and you don't feel confident enough, lean on professional genealogists. That's a profession. They can provide the services that you need to at least get you started. Start with building a floating trees on those free sites that I mentioned. Wicked Tree, FamilySearch.org, and Ancestry. Use as many resources as available, and the public library is a great source. Once you've exhausted what you can do and you've exceeded as much research as you can possibly imagine on your own, maybe you feel a little exhausted. It's like, take a break. Just remember, enjoy the journey, but consider genetic testing, because now you'll find other people who have tested it. Maybe they are family historians, and you'll be able to connect with them and get information. Create a journal along the way so you can pass it to the next generation. Again, enjoy the journey. So open to questions on any of the topics I've covered thus far, if you want to take a deeper dive in.
Wow. Every time I dive into genealogy, it reminds me of just the connections. It's like these threads that um, we're connected in ways that we get to explore, kind of like a scavenger hunt. So it can be a series of rabbit trails and deep dives, but so rewarding in being able to see what comes out of that unknown.
Yes.
Questions. Feel free to unmute and questions or comments that you have about this. Briefly, I got into genealogy back in 2013. That idea of public history, people telling their stories. I was working on a project as one of the historians on a Department of Transportation project where they were documenting the history of a historically African American community, one of those communities that would have come up and was created right after emancipation. So during the Reconstruction era. And one of the givebacks to each of those that participated in this collection of oral history was that they allowed me, as one of the historians on the project, to go and do a family tree for them. And it was really exciting that sometimes we could trace more of their family history than they knew. I was able to see over the years where at that time, back in 2013, we couldn't go further than emancipation. The records weren't digitized. So we couldn't go back to some of those sites. And then prompting me to do a deeper dive into my own family tree over the years as more and more information's become available. Every time I go onto Ancestry, it's like taking a scavenger hunt into the information. So it's been one of those rewarding hobbies that keeps on going. And even personally, some of these pointers, 3 years ago, my grandmother passed away in her 90s, and I took that opportunity. We had the family gathering to get all of the new marriages, all the new babies, and take some pictures. Little did I know that almost a week from that day, my mother would pass away. And so it was having that updated information for the next generation of youngsters, being able to have those photos with those names and those faces. I also was able to go back and pulling information from my grandmother's memorial and find some of those videos that are still in my Google Photos drive of my grandmother telling some of the bits and pieces of her life story. And so there's so many ways now that technology lets us capture. One of the things that I learned as being a historian was it's not history if you don't document it. It's memories, but those memories fade and they die away. When you documented, it is history. And so I'm encouraging of those who find any bit of passion in this particular area of their life to document it. Whether it's just your camera on your phone or your journal, whether it's photos that you've taken and that you've collected, document it, because you too become part of the historians for future generations. Subi says the document research curated by the genealogy sites and databases like Ancestry, are they only from Europe and America, like baptism and marriage certificates and voyage records, or do they have landholding records and other stuff like Hindu Brahmins records from India or Indonesia? Donnie, anything on that? I'll just chime in that I have so far found a relative that I think originated from Congo. It was documents that were from France that were a part of some family documents and property records out of France. You may be able to speak to that on specifically Hindu or Indian records or the broader global set of records.
Yeah, if you go back to that slide, I think like 2 slides back. Yeah, right there. And the one, yeah, both of those actually, because that one shows the results that and just Ancestry came up with. And again, remember, that's just one of several platforms. So each platform has a level of research and database that they have for each specific country. One may be leaning towards Europe, one may be leaning towards a certain ethnicity or region of the world. But they on their website, and again, I'm sorry I didn't have an overall global view of the other one, but on the previous slide where it shows Europe, it shows Greece, and it shows Latin America on Ancestry. Yeah, that slide right there. They actually have, it shows like a little icon where they have their records. And again, that's just one. So it's specific to where you're searching. So if you're searching for India, and again, I'm sorry, I didn't capture a big enough picture of that map, but I believe that they do have some resources and databases outside of, it's not just Europe, because I found some resources relating to Madagascar, because I have some ancestry in Madagascar as well, and Southeast Asia, and including the Philippines. So it's all country specific and based on the level of data that they have available at the time. And it's constantly changing. So you may not see it today and they update, say, hey, we have a new update. We have a new resource in the Philippines. So unfortunately, that's not one of their free resources. Maybe some of the other databases have it, but Ancestry, no. But in answer to your question, I think it might help you. I suggest you sign up for WikiTree. As I said earlier, WikiTree is a global site for genealogy and genetic genealogy research. They have both genetic genealogy and traditional ancestral research. So you can put in specifically India, and you can put in your surnames or as much data as you have, and as I said, build a tree for what you know, and then from that database, on WikiTree, I think you'll be surprised to see what's available. So I wouldn't just rely on Ancestry. I'd go back and again, WikiTree, familysearch.org, and these databases are constantly updated. So I'm optimistic for you.
Great question. Part of the mission that again connected for me was about being able to see the global community. This is it in family tree form, seeing our own personal global community. Any other questions today? Any other things that cross your mind? I've placed the PDF. I think it's still uploading. I'll also send it by email in case individuals aren't able to download it. My thing is spinning, so I don't know what that means, if it's actually sent it all the way through. But I'll make sure that you have access to that. Within a few days or so, this video will also be there, because you may want to go back and listen to specific parts as you're doing it and pause it and make additional notes or be able to assist you as you're doing your research in days to come, because I hope you're going to be inspired to do some of this research that we've talked about today. There's the link there also for WikiTree there in the chat. Any other questions? Well, Donnie, I want to thank you for again coming and thrilling me with something that excites me. One of my retirement hobbies is having time to be able to take some of these deep dives that genealogy provides. If you are one that likes scavenger hunts and roller coasters, this could be a hobby for you. I want to thank you for taking out time, all the research that you've done to be able to pass that on to others who may be wanting to find some of that connectedness in their own life. I really thank you for the time that you spent and the projects. There's lots of information available. And this is one of those searches where just start. Just start. I promise you, just start and it will unfold before you. Institute for giving us this platform to share with you. These are the diversity of ways that we are finding to recognize our connectedness on not just a personal level, but on a global level as well. And so we thank you all for coming and sharing with us today. Thank you, Donnie, for making the time. It looks like that document is actually doing the upload thing. So I'm going to give us just a few minutes to see if that will finish uploading. So if those of you would like to download that out of the chat, that it will then be available. I think it's available. You guys can click on it and see if it'll let you download that. Some of the other links there. We're glad for you sharing. Donnie, do you have any closing charge to the people now that they're all revved up? I can just feel it. They're all revved
I,
up and ready
I
to go.
really do.
Any charge to them?
I have a challenge, and a challenge is to everyone that is viewing this event today. If you haven't already done so, please create the first step and create your family tree. Even if it's just you and your mom and your dad, whatever you do, open your computer, laptop, public library computer, whatever it is, take that first step and just, it'll be such a wonderful heirloom to pass on to future generations. And I put another link in here, reference to a site that I'm curating. It's a global a DNA project where we're testing people from all around the world. And we just came up with another match, Lorana, for you and I, which complicates everything more, makes it interesting. But now we have another relative in England, and now we're having weekly chats with them, and they're connected through the Caribbean and Latin America. So start your tree, and if you're comfortable, take the DNA test. And I'd love to hear about it. You've got the website information there. Would love to hear about it, answer any questions. So thank you again, Lorana, and the Atlantic Institute. Thank you very much.
My pleasure. Definitely check out the project and learn some more about some of the things that Donnie has found out through his personal search and the search that's extended to all kinds of places around the world, including Ecuador,
Yes.
ancestrycompass.com. And we just want to thank you. Thank you for taking this this cultural field trip with me. The next upcoming field trip is we're going to be learning about Japanese pottery from Ecuadorian artist Raku Pottery, which is a Japanese style pottery, but with uh, um, uh, artists that are in Ecuador from different places in the world. So stay tuned. There's also a wonderful calendar of events with other of the correspondents throughout each of the months. If you haven't followed the Eventbrite page, you can follow that. And as the activities get posted, you can go. Oftentimes, they are free activities for you to explore with us. Thank you again for being a part of this today, Donnie. Thank you all for coming and participating. And with that, we wish you a wonderful Saturday afternoon. Thanks, everyone, and take care.